I just gave birth, and my husband let his brothers mock me about it. Now I'm wondering if I'll ever come first in our own home. 31F. I gave birth to my daughter 3 weeks ago, and things have been going smoothly under the circumstances. She's a beautiful, happy, and healthy baby, and I'm obviously completely in love with her. I've been with my husband Jared, 31 since we were in college. He's the oldest of 4 boys, 29M, 27, and 23M. Jared is the first of the brothers to have a child, and so his family has been very excited about our daughter. I love that Jared comes from such a large family since I only have an older brother. It's sweet that their family is so close, and that the brothers genuinely enjoy each other, but they tend to act rambunctious and boyish when they're all together. The middle two can be especially crude and overshare things that I really would prefer not to know. With that being said, they've been kind to me over the years, and I think they'll be great uncles to my daughter. Anyways, Jared's parents and brothers all decided to visit us this weekend. We're all scattered across California, so it's relatively easy to get to one another. When Jared first asked if I was ready for everyone to visit, I said yes and was excited. My MIL called and assured me that they'd come over for short visits when I was comfortable and that they could find things to do around the city when I need a break. The family is also renting an Airbnb, so Jared and I still have privacy and our own space. Everyone got in Friday night and came over after dinner to see me and the baby. My MIL cried and all of my BILs congratulated me and told me how beautiful my daughter is. It was a very special night, and I felt very happy my daughter has grandparents and uncles who love her so much. They came over again on this morning. My youngest Bill Ethan started asking me and Jared questions about the delivery. I truly think he was curious about how it works, and I didn't feel strange about the questions at first. Ethan asked Jared if he actually saw the baby come out, and he said yes. He said it was amazing to watch me bring our baby into the world and see what my body could do. He also said he was so proud of me. It was all very sweet, until the second youngest brother, Ben, then asked if it's true that women shit themselves during childbirth. My husband immediately said it's true and that he felt badly for the nurse who had to clean up after me. I was mortified and shocked, to say the least. My MIL told Jared that he shouldn't share those private details with anyone, and Jared immediately apologized. But my BLs couldn't stop laughing. I honestly felt like I was in a room of 12-year-old boys. My MIL kept telling them to stop, but my BLA couldn't seem to hold their laughter back. Ben told me I shouldn't be embarrassed since I'm the classiest person in the family, and that he's shit himself several times and didn't even have the excuse of giving birth. I think it was well-intentioned, but I obviously still felt embarrassed. I'm honestly exhausted and hormonal, so I excused myself and went upstairs to rest. They left shortly after, and Jared came upstairs and apologized again. Apparently, my MIL pulled him to the side and said his comments were completely inappropriate. She reminded Jared that I carried his child for 9 months and then went through a painful medical procedure to bring her into the world. She told Jared that he shouldn't say anything about the delivery process other than how proud he is of me. Jared knows he messed up and has apologized several times. He explained that pooping in childbirth is natural and that I have nothing to be embarrassed about, which is why he didn't stop to think before he blurted his comments out. I know he didn't mean to hurt me, but I was still feeling frustrated and said he should try acting like he's mature enough to be a father. Jared said my comment was fair, but also seemed hurt. They were supposed to come over again tonight, but I'm honestly not feeling up to it, and asked if they could come tomorrow morning instead. Everyone has been understanding. Jared is going to get dinner with his dad and brothers, and his mom is going to come over to help with the baby and give me time to rest. I'm not sure if I'm being sensitive, but I'm still very annoyed with my husband. It's obviously not the end of the world, and I'll probably forgive him soon, but I feel pissed when I think about it. I also wonder if my comment that he should act mature enough to be a dad was too harsh under the circumstances. ATA and Am I Overreacting? Update 1. Last night, after everything went down, I honestly wasn't sure how I felt about facing everyone again, even though Jared had been apologizing and trying to smooth things over since the minute his family left. But I told myself I'd see how things went in the morning. Jared's family had made breakfast plans at some cafe nearby and invited me, but I was exhausted, both from the late-night feeding and the emotional whiplash of everything. So I told Jared I'd sit this one out. Instead, I planned to enjoy the rare quiet time with our daughter, which honestly felt like the best thing I could do for myself. An hour or so later, Jared came back, holding coffee for me and looking visibly uncomfortable. He sat down across from me, fidgeting like he was about to break some news. Finally, he told me he had spoken to Ben and Ethan about how everything had gone yesterday, explaining that while he knew they didn't mean any harm, it just wasn't acceptable for them to act that way, especially now that we were parents. Apparently, Ben brushed it off with a lighten up man kind of response, saying I should expect this kind of thing with him around. I asked Jared what exactly that meant, and he admitted that Ben can be like this, acting like everyone just has to get on board with his sense of humor, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. I didn't say much, but I think Jared could tell that I wasn't happy. It's one thing to apologize, but if he's just letting his brother off the hook as usual, I don't see how that actually helps the situation. Jared promised me he'd handle it, and that the guys had plans for the day anyway, so it would give me some breathing room. I felt slightly reassured by that, and told him I needed some space to really process everything that happened. Jared seemed to understand and agreed to let me have the house to myself for a bit. Later, his mom came over, offering to keep an eye on the baby while I took a nap or just relaxed. She didn't say anything directly about the situation, but she did say, "I'm sorry about the boys." Something about how she said it caught my attention, like maybe there was more she wasn't saying. I hesitated, but then I finally asked if Ben's behavior was a recurring problem for the family. She sighed, then explained that yes, Ben has always been the wild card of the group. Apparently, he's always been a bit of a jokester, someone who loves pushing boundaries and getting reactions out of people. Jared, on the other hand, has always been the peacemaker, the one smoothing over any family conflicts, making excuses for Ben's behavior, and generally just trying to keep things harmonious. Hearing this made something click in my mind. Suddenly, I understood why Jared had seemed so quick to brush off what happened the day before. He spent years playing defense for his brother, trying to keep the peace. And here I was, wanting him to stop doing that entirely, to shift everything he'd been conditioned to do for years. I couldn't decide if I felt better or worse, but it did make me realize this wasn't just a one-off situation. This was a dynamic Jared had been playing into for years, and now it was affecting me too. At one point, Mill stopped, hesitated for a moment, and then admitted that she sometimes felt like she'd enabled Ben to act the way he does. She said that growing up, Ben was always the one who struggled the most with fitting in, getting into trouble at school, and just generally being the odd man out. She admitted that it often led to the family handling him with kid gloves, letting him get away with things that, in hindsight, were probably a bit out of line. She added, "It's hard to parent when you feel like one of your kids just doesn't quite fit the mold. Maybe we gave him too much freedom." There was a hint of regret in her voice, like maybe she knew they'd been letting him push boundaries unchecked for too long. After Emil left, I spent some time just thinking about what she said. It really put a lot into perspective for me. I couldn't stop wondering how often Jared had put up with Ben's nonsense over the years, biting his tongue just to avoid stirring the pot. It explained a lot about why Jared had seemed almost resigned when his brother started laughing yesterday, like he knew how pointless it was to try stopping them. It was just Ben being Ben, and in his family that was apparently a free pass to act however he wanted, even if it hurt people in the process. And now, here I was, fresh from childbirth, trying to assert myself and set boundaries that nobody in his family seemed used to respecting. When Jared got back later, he seemed tired but genuinely ready to listen. We sat down, and I laid it all out there. I told him I wasn't just upset about the comment or the fact that the guys laughed at me. I was upset that he didn't seem to take it seriously, that he allowed his brother to mock me in my own home when I was at my most vulnerable. I told him that I understood he'd been dealing with this dynamic his whole life, but that now things had changed. We weren't just dating college kids anymore. We were parents, and I needed to feel like I could trust him to support and protect me, even from his family if need be. Jared listened, and then he admitted something I wasn't expecting. He said he sometimes feels trapped between his family and me, like no matter what he does, someone's going to end up unhappy. He admitted he hates conflict, and that sometimes it just feels easier to let Ben do his thing, rather than call him out and deal with the inevitable argument. But then he looked at me and said, "I realize now that it's not fair to you. I see that, and I'm sorry." I asked him if he really meant it, if he was truly willing to start setting boundaries with his family, even if it meant Ben might not like it. He paused, then nodded, saying he'd talk to his brother and make it clear that things had to change. I could tell it wasn't going to be easy for him, but at least he seemed willing to try. I wasn't sure how much it would actually help, but hearing him acknowledge that it was a problem felt like a step in the right direction. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, Jared got a text from Ben. Apparently, he'd picked up on the vibe that things were still tense between us and figured Jared should apologize for getting so serious over nothing. Jared showed me the text, and I just shook my head. It was like Ben genuinely couldn't grasp the idea that maybe, just maybe, his behavior wasn't always harmless or funny. Jared sighed, deleted the text, and said, "I'll deal with him tomorrow." And in that moment, I realized he was actually serious about putting me first. I don't know how things will play out from here. Part of me wonders if Ben's ever going to truly understand why his behavior isn't okay, but maybe that's not my problem to fix. All I know is that for the first time, Jared seems committed to drawing the line and supporting me. We still have a lot to work through, and I'm sure this isn't the last time Ben will try to push buttons, but at least now I feel like Jared's on my side. And that's all I really wanted. Update 2. After everything from yesterday, Jared actually seemed like he was in a serious, no-nonsense mood. He told me he'd talk to Ben and set boundaries, but I honestly thought he'd do what he usually does. Give him a quick, "Hey, cut it out," and then brush it under the rug. But today, he came home after his talk with Ben, looking completely exhausted, and sat down across from me with this look I'd never really seen on him before. He seemed both drained and determined, which was a strange combination. He admitted, "I think I might finally see where you're coming from with this." Apparently, the conversation with Ben didn't go well, which didn't surprise me, but hearing about it from Jared's perspective was something else. Jared started out just trying to explain that Ben's comments and laughter were hurtful to me and weren't appropriate, especially now that we're trying to settle into life with a newborn. According to Jared, Ben dismissed it all as overthinking, saying I was making a big deal out of a natural process, and then actually joked that maybe she needs more sleep if she's that cranky. Jared said he pushed back, telling him this was about respecting me in my own home, which is when Ben went off. He apparently accused Jared of changing since becoming a dad, saying he was getting soft and acting all whipped now that we were married and had a baby. Ben went so far as to say Jared was putting a woman over family, which honestly sent me through the roof when Jared told me. I had to take a deep breath just hearing it. I was furious on Jared's behalf, but he seemed weirdly calm about it all. He told me that for the first time he actually saw the whole pattern for what it was, how Ben always managed to find a way to make himself the victim, twist the situation, and try to make Jared feel guilty for just being a responsible adult. Jared admitted that he felt like he'd spent most of his life letting Ben get away with things, trying to keep things smooth in the family and not wanting to rock the boat. He said he hadn't realized how deeply ingrained that instinct was until now, until he had a family of his own to think about and protect. Jared then told me that he'd set a clear boundary with Ben. He said if Ben couldn't respect both of us in our own home, then he didn't need to come around, at least until he was willing to apologize and start acting like an adult. Jared's exact words were, "I'm not putting my wife and daughter in uncomfortable situations just because you can't be bothered to grow up." Ben predictably did not take this well, and apparently stormed off, saying something about how Jared was choosing me over family, which was a running theme in the conversation, it seemed. Jared admitted that it hurt to hear those things, even though he knew they were nonsense. He said he'd always looked out for Ben, almost like he was his responsibility, and that hearing Ben act like he was the one being wronged actually made him feel more protective of our little family. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time, it felt like Jared was finally seeing the situation as I did. Not just a joke or a misunderstanding, but a real boundary issue that needed handling. After Jared told me everything, he asked how I was feeling about it all, and I didn't hold back. I told him that I appreciated the effort he put into standing up for me, but that this wasn't just about a one-time comment or even just about Ben. It was about feeling safe, respected, and valued in my own home, which is especially crucial right now with a newborn. I told him that as much as I love him, I need to feel like he's able to protect me from anyone, even his family, if they're making me feel uncomfortable or disrespected. I could tell my words hit him hard, but in a way that seemed to make him more determined. He nodded and said, "I'm not going to let you feel like you're alone in this. I promise." It was honestly the most open and raw conversation we'd had in a long time. Jared admitted he'd been scared to set boundaries with his brothers, especially with Ben, because he worried it would change the family dynamic. He told me that growing up, it was drilled into them that family comes first, no matter what. But now that we have our own family, he realizes it's time to redefine what family first actually means. He said, "I get it now. I can't just be a brother, I have to be a husband and a father too. And if that means Ben doesn't like it, then he'll have to deal with it." The rest of the day, Jared was more attentive than I'd ever seen him. He helped out with our daughter, checked in on me constantly, and even made dinner. I could tell he was doing everything he could to show me that he was taking this seriously. And for the first time, I actually felt like we were on the same team, both of us working to protect our little family and set the boundaries we needed. The weirdest part? Later in the evening, Jared got a message from his mom. She'd spoken with Ben, and apparently he'd told her his side of the story, how Jared had turned on him and chose me over his own brother. She said she'd been surprised by how upset Ben sounded and asked Jared what had really happened. Jared, to his credit, told her everything, no sugarcoating. He said he loved his brother, but that he wouldn't tolerate disrespect toward me anymore, especially not after all I'd gone through with childbirth and adjusting to life as a new mom. Mill actually seemed to support him. She said she'd been worried about Ben's behavior herself, and that she was glad Jared was putting his new family first. Hearing her back Jared up felt like validation I didn't realize I needed. The thing is, even with Jared and his mom on the same page, I can tell this isn't going to be easy. Ben isn't one to just let things go, and I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to keep pushing boundaries or making things awkward in the future. But Jared assured me that if it happens, he'll be ready to enforce the boundary, even if that means telling Ben to leave. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I also know that this is probably just the beginning of a new chapter in family dynamics for Jared and me. For now, I feel like we're in a better place. Jared has shown me he's willing to stand up for me, and he seems committed to making sure that my feelings are prioritized, even if it makes things tense with his brother. I know it's going to be a process, but knowing that he's actually willing to step up and have the hard conversations makes me feel a lot more secure in our relationship. And ultimately, that's all I wanted, to feel like we're both working toward the same goal, creating a safe, respectful, and loving home for our daughter. For now, we're going to focus on our little family and try to take things one day at a time. I'm not sure how things will shake out with Ben, but I'm ready to set our boundaries and protect our peace. And now, thankfully, Jared is too.